And this is the beginning of what becomes the modern scientific mathematical principles applied to the world.
And Heidegger's the other one to read. I mean, Husserl names it, and Heidegger writes book after book on it, right? And just working very systematically through what is happening in Descartes' rules for the direction of the mind, what's happening in Galileo's works, and so line by line, this change that revolutionizes science.
And it's also, side note, I believe I have my chronology right, Descartes as the first introduction of the subject occurs after the mathematization of the world. And it's not for nothing that, right, one of the key components of Descartes is not simply the subject itself, but also the algebra of the universal mathematization, or the possibility of universal mathematization.
It also might be worth mentioning too that the historical changes, sort of sea changes of things like Alain science, and not only things like physics, but also things like chemistry and classification of animals outlined in Foucault's Orders of Things.
Yeah, which is a fantastic study of this very,
All right.
that 300-year history that follows after Galileo.
So we were talking about the first epic of ontology as being, as referring to sort of Parmenides' thinking as
Euclid's being, think Euclid.
Yeah,
I mean,
sorry,
I mean, it is rooted in Parmenides in ways, right? But Euclid is the one who formalizes it.
The reason I said Plato, right, is because Plato uses a lot of mathematics in his philosophies.
For Badiou, Plato is the first philosopher dealing at a meta-ontological level with
Questions of
science.
truth related to the various truth procedures.
Right, he's the one that's actually asking questions of truth about it, if you will.
Yeah,
But
I definitely got Euclid from
yeah.
the first epic.
But Plato doesn't invent any science. He's not a
Yeah.
scientist, right?
He's just thinking about all the general.
But he's thinking about it as a condition for philosophy.
And just the fact that it's present in things like the Meno or Theaetetus or...
Right.
So is there a shift that, I mean, the only shift from the first to the second is just in terms of mathematizing the world or nature?
Nature itself.
Yeah.
The world is written in numbers.
But there's no change in the connection with knowledge and truth.
Right. This coupling remains. That's right. It's a new epic internally. Right.
And so then there's the third epic.
That we're now entering, and the third epic is going to be launched by Sifton.
Yeah, it was like Cantor.
Cantor, Frege, Russell, and the very crisis
Right.
of mathematics.
That's going to be traced in meditation 3. Right.
Right.
Yeah, if we're willing to talk about it, I know we're still on page 3, but the second epic of the Doctrine of Truth, is he sort of outwardly suggesting that he is the new epic of the theory of the subject?
Oh, of the
So it's like,
no,
I
he's,
mean,
Descartes, the Hegel, and then
he
Marx.
means Descartes, then Lacan.
yeah, I mean, like, yeah, the
Lacan.
first, so there's like the sort of pre-Descartesian.
Yeah, so
epic
he's-
afterwards.
Well,
Just so we're still in the second.
it's
epic.
We're still in the second epic.
It's the Cartesian and then the post-Cartesian.
Just for the introduction, you actually said the second epoch of truth. You meant subject.
Yeah, you meant subject. right?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so I just
For
wanted
the
to
purpose
clear
of-
that.
Yeah, I said it later, but at first
Yeah.
I was wrong.
Yeah, so for him, he's not launching that second era of the subject. He's within it.
So, this particular line at the very middle of page 3 says the contemporary subject is void, cleaved, asubstantial, irreflexive. So is he saying that that's what Descartes started?
The question of the subject is raised by Descartes first.
But that's the first epoch.
But launches the first epic.
Well,
The second epic is going to begin with.
So before that time, the theory of the subject wasn't.
There wasn't one.
Okay, so who was? I'm sorry for the purposes of repeating. Who started this sort of second epic?
The second epic.
Marx and
Freud.
So
I mean, Marx and Freud, basically.
I think the thing to point out, and this is one of Badiou's main
Somewhat in the mix of Marx and Freud.
One of the things that Badiou has to do is separate a subject from the object, right? Even going back to Descartes has his meditations. He's like, oh, I have a piece of wax, and I'm the thing thinking about the wax, right? It develops a sort of thinking about things as a connection to like a subject thinking an object, right? That's how you have a subject. I was gonna go to Marx and Alain really quick, unless you're correcting that.
Well, no, I mean that's.
But then, that goes all the way up to what, Hegel, possibly, and then Marx breaks with Hegel.
Yeah.
And what you have is a proletarian subject who's structurally set up in capitalism, and then as well as Lacan, who's a subject. Sorry, Freud, but I'll go more Lacan. Freud's subject is more of psychoanalysis.
Maybe this will help clarify. In Descartes, you can think about the world, you can think about your thing, about your thoughts, right? I mean, these are the main two things that you think about in Descartes, right? And you can do so perfectly transparently, right? You can transparently think all of your thoughts. You can transparently think everything that is presented to you in the world, right? And it's perfectly transparent. It's just a matter of, right, using the right methodology, the proper method of philosophy to clear out the unrelated ideas so you can rigorously, properly, and transparently think those ideas, right? And so this is the first introduction to the subject. So everybody good on that?
Yeah, no, I think where you're probably going with this is the fact that the Cartesian subject is not at all contingent.
Well, it's not just about contingency, it's about transparency.
Transparency.
You'll notice there's a political break, and then, as I understand it, it's a break of love with both Freud and Marx and Freud respectively. One thing of Marx, right, the introduction is that of the German ideology, right, or this is a good place to find it. Suddenly the subject is no longer perfectly transparent. Why do we think the thoughts that we think? Because they're conditioned by, and our material conditions, and by capitalism, and our social epoch, and the means of production, and our concrete relations. Suddenly our thoughts are no longer transparently thinkable, right? It's a void, it's an emptiness that is then conditioned by the political economy around us. And analogously, right, with Freud, our thoughts it's no longer a transparent subjectivity, but rather a broken, fragmented subjectivity of which the unconscious speaks, right, which is determined by our subjectivization, our growth into human beings, right? So the first period is this transparent Cartesian subject, then there's the break to the non-transparent.
Could you name it also the political subject, right? You have a scientific subject with Descartes, like following a rigorous method to think your thoughts transparently, and then it's a political subject with Marx, and then a subject of love with Freud and Kant.
I think that's right.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
And I think you can add to the mix, right, which is not uncommon outside of Badiou's tradition in France, to say, and Nietzsche is also a subject of art.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah. That's what I was going to ask where the art subject was in. But
Yeah, because for Nietzsche, that's exactly what art is. There's an unconscious in art, right? It's this experience of a kind of artistic unconscious.
But also the genealogy.
Right, and that's where the genealogy of Morris comes out.
Does that answer?
Third essay. Yeah, no, self-contingency. Got it.
Okay, so, in what sections 3 through 5 of the introduction, which we'll just mention briefly. So what pages 6 through about.
So on 3 basically introduces, I think, the first time mathematics equals ontology, and then goes through the 3 things why this solves a problem of, again, uncoupling a subject from an object, getting a
Right.
subject.
And for the most part, I think I want to leave that until we work through that in the meditations themselves.
Okay.
Sections 3 through 5 then, from page 6 to 15, I think we can summarize in saying both mathematicians and philosophers don't like what Badiou is doing. I mean, I think that really sums it up. Really well. And then in the last section, that is not just procedural, I guess we could say. Section 6, beginning on page 15 and just going on to the next page. He gets the concepts that are going to be crucial to him, right? Being, of course, given what he's doing, but also then event, subject, and the generic. And so those are the 4 terms, those are the watchwords, I guess, for everything he's going to be doing in this book. Keep an eye on those terms, though they're only going to unfold slowly. And then I don't know that we need to say anything about section 7, right? He's mostly just laying out what he's doing in the rest of the book, etc.
Yeah, he basically outlines what he's,
So anything else we want to say? Or shall we jump into meditation now?
Let's do
I'm not
meditation.
for one unless.
Okay. So meditation 1, here things get a little thicker, as if that weren't thick enough, right? But yeah, I wanted to spend that time on the introduction like that, just so that we sort of situate Badiou's larger project, though he hasn't yet given us a word about that project really itself. And he starts in meditation 1, so here we'll be doing philosophy much more directly. So he's beginning with the classic question of the multiple and the one. And the classic way of doing this, from Plato on, is to assume that the one is a question of being, and the multiple is a question of appearance. This is all over Plato. The idea being that we experience things as multiple, there are lots of things around, there's this kind of Heraclitean flux of things in our experience and so forth. Appearance is always changing. But behind that, there's got to be some kind of unity, some kind of one that's holding things together. And that's what is. If you will, you can put it in terms of the forms, if they've got some kind of metaphysical content. Much better probably is to take the Parmenidean notion of things. For Parmenides, there's this is even stricter, this division. But this is classic. I mean, I don't think we need to spend a lot of time going through it in Plato because this is from then on down. I mean, this is more or less the conception.